Let me tell you folks, Oakwood Glen Estates always looked like the American dream on a postcard. Neat rows of two-story colonials, emerald lawns trimmed to the exact inch the HOA demanded, white picket fences that screamed, "We're all friends here." Kids rode bikes in the cul-de-sac, dads washed trucks on Saturday mornings, and everyone waved like they meant it. But underneath that glossy surface, it was a powder keg ruled by one woman who turned community standards into her own little dictatorship. Her name was Susan Langley, president of the HOA for 4 brutal years. Short blonde bob that never moved in the wind, clipboard permanently glued to her manicured hand, and eyes that could spot a single dandelion from 3 houses away. Susan didn't just enforce rules, she weaponized them. Flag up past July 4th. $50 fine. Mailbox not regulation beige. Another fine. God forbid your kid left a bike in the driveway overnight. Jake Morrison had lived there 8 years without much trouble. 42, divorced dad raising his 14-year-old daughter Emma alone after his wife passed. Worked as an auto mechanic downtown, kept his classic Ford pickup shiny, and parked that fishing boat trailer beside the garage like every other guy in the neighborhood. He mowed on schedule, paid his dues on time, and mostly kept to himself, until the day he came back from his annual week-long fishing trip in Montana. Jake pulled his truck into the street at dusk, tired but happy, already picturing the grilled trout he'd cook for Emma. Then he saw it. A 6-foot wooden fence, ugly, uneven, slapped together with crooked nails, slammed right across the middle of his driveway, completely blocking him from pulling in. The thing looked like it had been built by drunk contractors in a hurry. "What the actual hell?" he muttered, slamming the door so hard the truck rocked. He stood there staring, keys still in his hand, while Emma texted from the passenger seat asking why they weren't home yet. Across the street, old Mr. Reynolds was watering his roses like nothing was wrong. Jake marched over. "Jerry, what in God's name happened here?" Jerry shut off the hose, glanced nervously towards Susan's house 3 doors down, and whispered like the walls had ears. "Susan called an emergency meeting while you were gone, buddy. Said your driveway extended 6 inches over the easement line. Nobody saw a vote, nobody got an email, but next thing you know, bam. Contractors showed up yesterday. She told them it was for the good of the community aesthetics." Jerry shook his head. "Fenced you out of your own damn house, Jake." Unbelievable. Jake didn't even unpack the cooler. He stormed straight to Susan's front door and pounded like the police. She opened it wearing her signature navy slacks and floral blouse that somehow always looked judgmental. That smug little smile was already plastered on her face. Well, Jake. Back from your little boy's trip? I hope you understand this fence is purely for the neighborhood's benefit. Your driveway has been violating code for years. We held an emergency vote. It passed unanimously." Jake crossed his arms, trying to keep his voice level even though his blood was boiling. "Show me the minutes, Susan. Show me one single document where the board voted on this." She waved her clipboard like it was the Bible. "They're still being processed, dear. You know how paperwork goes. But rules are rules. Your boat trailer was already an eyesore. This just cleans it up." He laughed, short and bitter. "Cleaned it up by trespassing on my property? Cute." Before he said something he'd regret in front of Emma watching from the truck, he turned and walked away. But inside, Jake wasn't defeated. He was calculating. That night, after Emma went to bed, he pulled out the property survey he'd kept in the fire safe since he bought the house. Red laser measure in hand, he walked the line at midnight under the streetlights. The fence wasn't on any easement. It was smack in the middle of his legal driveway, 2 full feet onto his land. Susan had just committed straight-up vandalism and trespassing. He sat at the kitchen table till sunrise, printing county plat maps, marking measurements in red ink, and texting his buddy Lance who worked zoning at the county office. "This isn't about the fence anymore," Jake told himself, sipping black coffee. "This is about ending Susan's reign of terror before she does it to someone else, especially my kid who can't even ride her bike out the garage now." The quiet mechanic everyone thought was harmless? He was loading the shotgun of evidence, and Susan had no idea the barrel was pointed right at her. By morning, Jake had a folder thick enough to choke a lawyer. He met Lance in the courthouse parking lot before his shift. Lance flipped through the pages, eyebrows climbing. "Jesus, Jake. This isn't gray area. This is criminal encroachment. She built a permanent structure on private land without permits, without notice, without a damn thing. They walked the property together later, GPS in hand, bright orange string marking the true boundary. The fence cut across it like a middle finger to the law. Jake snapped photos from every angle while Lance planted little flags. "I'm reporting this to code enforcement today," Lance said. "You're getting a removal order." An hour later, the city inspector Rena showed up, steel-toe boots, no-nonsense tablet, badge clipped to her jacket. She didn't waste time. Why wasn't the HOA required to file anything? Jake just shrugged. They didn't. Susan told the crew it was HOA land. Turns out it's mine. Rena measured, photographed, checked for utilities. Consider this an active case. They'll get 48 hours to tear it down, or we escalate to the sheriff. And if anyone harasses you, call me direct. Jake didn't wait for Susan to come to him. That evening, as the neighborhood did its usual dog walk parade, he wheeled a whiteboard out onto his front lawn. Big blown-up map of the whole subdivision, his property lines highlighted in green, the fence lines slashed across in screaming red tape. Header in bold Sharpie. Illegal construction by HOA president. Neighbors gathered fast, some with lawn chairs, some just curious. Denise, the nurse from 2 doors down, read it and gasped. She didn't even pretend to ask the board. My God, she fined me last month for my American flag being up too long. Mr. Kaplan, the retired accountant on the corner, shook his head. I got a notice while you were gone saying my rose bushes were non-compliant. Never happened before. Jake just pointed at the evidence. There was no vote. She made it up. City's already involved. Like a shark smelling blood, Susan came marching down the sidewalk, heels clicking like gunfire. This is defamation and public harassment, she snapped, arms crossed so tight her pearls looked ready to pop. Jake stepped aside calmly. Then educate us, Susan. Show the vote. Show one legal paper saying you could build on my land. Her mouth opened, closed, opened again. Nothing. She tried another angle. The board authorized it internally. Jake smiled the coldest smile he'd ever worn. Which board members? Because I called Alan this morning. He knew nothing. Rebecca's been in Florida 2 weeks. That leaves you, sweetheart. Solo act. She turned beet red. This is an internal HOA matter. You're violating protocol by dragging the city in. Jake leaned in just enough for the gathering crowd to hear. Wrong again. You violated state law when you ordered trespass on private property. That's a crime. And those 3 guys you hired? No licenses, no vests, no permit signs posted. I have photos. Want to tell everyone who really paid them? Out of our dues. The crowd murmured. Susan spun on her heel and stormed off without another word. But not before Jake heard her mutter, "You'll regret this." That night he filed the formal complaint with the sheriff's office. Survey, Lance's report, Rena's photos, timestamps. Investigation opened in 24 hours. By Friday, a city crew arrived with bolt cutters and a saw. Jake watched from his porch as the fence came down piece by piece in full daylight, while half the neighborhood filmed on their phones. Susan stormed out halfway through, screaming at the workers. "You can't do this. This is HOA property." The lead guy didn't even look up. "Talk to the city, lady. I'm just following orders." The last panel hit the grass with a beautiful thud. But Jake wasn't finished. Not even close. The real twist hit that same weekend when Jake called the emergency community meeting in his backyard. Not the stuffy clubhouse Susan loved, but right under the open sky with lemonade and folding chairs. He set up a projector, served snacks, and played the slideshow that would change everything. Slide 1, photos of the fence. Slide 2, property map with the red violation line. Slide 3, city notice. Slide 4, a quiet timeline of Susan's greatest hits. Bypassing votes for 6 months, fining people for holiday lights 2 days late, threatening foreclosure over grass length. "This isn't just my driveway," Jake told the 50 neighbors packed in. "This is how one woman hijacked our whole community. She made decisions in secret, spent our money without consent, and turned neighbors into enemies." Alan stood up first. "We need a full financial audit, right now." Rebecca, back from Florida, nodded hard. "And a special election to recall her immediately." The crowd roared in agreement. Susan's blinds were wide open across the street. She watched every second. Then came the twist nobody saw coming. Halfway through the Q&A, a soft-spoken woman named Carla, former board secretary who'd quietly resigned last year, raised her hand. "Jake, I have something." She pulled out a flash drive. Susan never held that vote. "I have the real meeting audio." She told the crew to just do it and blame the easement. But worse, she paid those contractors out of the HOA emergency fund using checks made out to her nephew's shell company. "I only found out because one invoice had her personal address on it by mistake." Gasps rippled through the yard. Jake felt the ground shift. This wasn't petty vandalism anymore. This was embezzlement. Carla's voice cracked. "She's been doing it for 18 months. Landscaping that never happened, community upgrades that were actually her vacation cabin roof. I was scared to speak up, but after what she did to you and your daughter, I'm done." The crowd exploded. Phones came out. Screenshots of old fines flooded the group chat. Mrs. Langford, the sweet 80-year-old, revealed she'd been fined 27 times for mailbox misalignment in 3 months. Money that mysteriously vanished into Susan's admin fees. Single dad Miguel held up a bill for a fake beautification project that never existed. Jake printed everything and drove it straight to Detective Marissa Hale at Financial Crimes the next morning. By Monday, the sheriff's office had frozen the HOA account. Susan didn't show at the emergency board meeting. Alan opened it with a motion to remove her instantly. Unanimous. But the real hammer dropped when the county released the initial report. Susan had been collecting secret processing fees on every fine and routing them through a company registered to her niece in another state. Grand jury convened within days. 5 felony counts: fraud, misappropriation, wire fraud. Jake stood on his porch that night watching the sunset paint the now-open driveway gold. Emma rode her bike in circles, laughing for the first time in weeks. "Dad, you actually did it." He smiled, but inside he knew the fight was just beginning. Susan wasn't going quietly. The neighborhood turned into a war room. People who'd never spoken more than "nice weather" started showing up at Jake's with folding tables and red pens. They compiled every suspicious charge, every forged minute, every fake vote into one massive shared folder and sent it to the district attorney. That weekend, 2 detectives and a uniformed officer arrived at Susan's door with a search warrant. She didn't answer at first, but after the locksmith popped the lock, they carried out boxes of documents, her laptop, and 3 external hard drives. Half the block watched from their porches in stunned silence. The same woman who once ticketed wind chimes now being escorted to a cruiser while clutching her pearls like they could save her. Jake didn't cheer publicly. He just called his brother, who ran a small law firm, and drafted the motion to dissolve the current board under the HOA Charter's emergency clause. 2/3 of homeowners signed in 48 hours. No objections. The city's final fence report listed every violation and named Jake first for restitution from the frozen account. But the forensic accountant uncovered the real bombshell. Susan had been running a small-scale racket, moving between HOAs every few years, embedding herself as president, then siphoning funds through shell companies before suspicion grew. Oakwood Glen was just her latest victim. Federal agents from the Inspector General's office showed up next. "This isn't local anymore," Agent Kessler told Jake in a quiet conference room. "Her name appears in 3 other counties. Your timestamps and maps gave us the leverage." Jake handed over Carla's flash drive and every receipt. Susan's legal team scrambled for a plea, but she violated her gag order by trying to contact Alan to fix an old laptop. Pretrial detention, no house arrest. At the town council meeting, Jake stood as the new board representative and proposed countywide reforms. Mandatory annual independent audits posted online. Term limits. No single-person expenditures over $500. The mayor called it the most comprehensive resident-led overhaul I've ever seen and passed it unanimously. They even funded workshops and a hotline for future victims. Back home, the block party wasn't about celebrating Susan's fall. It was about rebirth. Potluck tables, kids playing again without fear of fines, real conversations instead of nervous waves. Miguel handed Jake a beer. "You didn't just fix your driveway. You taught us how to fight back." 2 weeks before Susan's sentencing, Jake delivered his final affidavit. The DA's case was ironclad. He was the star witness. In court, the judge didn't mince words. "You weaponized the trust of your neighbors. You turn dues meant for community good into your personal empire. 7 federal counts, 2 state. 12 years, no parole for the first 6. Full restitution. Her properties would be sold, and every penny returned proportionally. The news made statewide headlines, but the real victory was quieter. The old HOA office became a shared workspace. Solar panels went up, a little lending library appeared, and a local artist painted a mural on the side, a winding path through tall grass with the words, "This land, our voice." Jake took the last piece of that cursed fence wood from his shed, sawed it in half, and built a simple bench at the edge of his driveway. 2 planks, some screws, facing the street. It became the unofficial gathering spot, neighbors sitting with coffee, watching sunsets, no clipboards in sight. One evening a kid on a bike stopped. "Hey mister, is that the fence bench?" Jake laughed. "Yep." Turned something ugly into something useful. The boy grinned. "My dad said you turned bad into good." A final letter arrived from the Inspector General thanking Jake. Several of his reforms were now being studied statewide. That night he sat on the bench, Emma beside him, porch lights flickering on across the street. The air smelled like fresh-cut grass and freedom. No fences, no fear, just neighbors. And Jake knew, deep down, the foundation they'd rebuilt was stronger than any rule Susan could ever write. Sometimes all it takes is one regular guy who refuses to be fenced in. The rest of us? We finally learned how to stand up too.